Hello ladies and gentlemen, this is Jeff Rains coming to you again with Foundation of Civilization. And I have a question today that I think we really need to address. When we look at the U.S. involvement around the world, and the U.S. is still the remaining superpower, what's going on? Why are we spending the money that we do? Why are we sending the young men and young women out to potentially be harmed or killed? What have you really looked at what U.S. foreign policy is lately? Can you tell me what it is? What is our interest in the conflicts that we've chosen? What is our interest in Ukraine? Democracy? You should look up how things are run in Ukraine. Ever since it broke away from the Soviet Union, it's been identified as one of the most corrupt places in the world. And don't try to think I'm arguing to support Russia. Russia's an aggressor nation. They have invaded nearly all of its neighbors. Ask yourself, is the loss of hundreds of thousands of Ukrainians, possibly 1 million Ukrainians, worth the benefits that we have gained? Never mind the billions of dollars that we're losing. What about the Middle East? What's our policy there? Israel? There are plenty of other nations in the area that need to be addressed as well, whether you support Israel's existence or not. So let's look back at foreign policy, U.S. foreign policy over the past 250 years. Early on, the United States took an isolationist and neutral position from 1776 to 1823. The United States' approach to foreign policy in its nascent years was heavily influenced by George Washington's farewell address in 1796, which advocated for neutrality and caution in entangling alliances. This period saw the U.S. primarily focused on internal development and westward expansion, avoiding European conflicts and maintaining a stance of isolationism. This was the period where Napoleon Bonaparte was ravaging Europe. Now, an interesting event happened during this time. The Barbary Wars from 1801 to 1805, and then again in 1815 and 16. The Barbary Wars were the first expeditionary military experience for the U.S. Prior to that, we had the War the Revolutionary War, and that was pretty much it. The majority of the world powers at the time were just dealing with the Muslim pirates along the North African coast in Algiers, Tunis, Tripoli, and Morocco by paying ransoms. Those pirates would go along seizing ships. They would raid villages along the coast and take slaves and take them back to North Africa. When U.S. ships started to have problems, Thomas Jefferson communicated with the Barbary pirates, and the pirates demanded the equivalent of 20% of the U.S. economy. Jefferson decided to put the money into the military. We built up our Navy and developed our Marines and sent them to destroy the pirates. Obviously it took a few years, but the Barbary pirates ceased to exist. So if you're angry with U.S. military, that the U.S. military has a worldwide presence, you can thank a bunch of North African pirates of the former Ottoman Empire. Then we entered the phase of the Monroe Doctrine and Manifest Destiny. In 1823, James Monroe articulated the Monroe Doctrine, warning European powers against further colonization and intervention in the Western Hemisphere. This doctrine underscored the U.S.'s growing assertiveness in regional affairs. Meanwhile, the concept of Manifest Destiny fueled expansionist policies, leading to the annexation of Texas, the Mexican-American War, and the acquisition of territories like California and the Southwest. This was a time period when the Western Europeans, the people that had been settling in the colonies in the East, started to push the indigenous population out. The Sioux, the Cheyenne. This was also the time of the Trail of Tears, when we pushed them out to Oklahoma, and the eastern tribes out to Oklahoma, and then later we sent more settlers into Oklahoma. Right, wrong, or indifferent. That's what history. That's what history was. Next, we entered our period of imperialism and world power status. As the United States had grown so big and we had a new technology that allowed us to communicate and to ship our goods all over within the United States itself and all over the world, we decided to assert ourselves even more. So from 1898 to 1945, we ran into a few events. The Spanish-American War in 1898 marked a turning point as the U.S. emerged as a global power. The Treaty of Paris granted the U.S. control over former Spanish territories, including Puerto Rico, Guam, and the Philippines. The early 20th century saw further expansion of influence through construction of the Panama Canal and involvement in World War I under President Woodrow Wilson, who envisioned a new world order based on democratic principles and collective security. The USA had a significant say in how the world map was redrawn, especially Europe after World War I. This caused significant problems because we forced former enemies under the same government. Especially if you look like in the former Yugoslavia, not so much the Czech Republic and Slovakia, there are quite a few areas where people just did not get along very well. We also began finding that occupation was difficult. When we occupied the Philippines, we had a huge problem with insurgents. Many of them were very dedicated and willing to lose their lives to attack U.S. troops. We began to practice a little bit different policy. The U.S. would work with a country, often after a conflict between each other. We asked them to allow us to station military in the area, and they would be given access to U.S. markets. This is especially blew up, however you want to look at it, after the Cold War. The U.S. opened the post-World War II era as the only intact economy in the world with all the power that provides. The U.S. adopted a policy of containment to counter the spread of communism, leading to the Cold War with the Soviet Union. This era was characterized by significant international engagements, including the establishment of NATO, the Marshall Plan to rebuild Europe, and involvement in conflicts such as Korea and Vietnam Wars. The Cuban Missile Crisis and the policy of détente under Presidents Nixon and Ford exemplified the complex dynamics of U.S.-Soviet relationships. Europe and much of the world enjoyed a Pax Americana, a American peace. And whether you like it or not, you knew who was in charge. You knew who you had to listen to, or there would be trouble. While the European countries rebuilt the U.S. occupied aggressor nations of Germany, Italy, and Japan. We also maintained a number of bases with our friends in the United Kingdom, Spain, and others. The focus of the world was on economics, on trade. We began to exercise economic pressure more than military pressure. The assistance of our friends around the world started to hit serious challenges. In Korea, the country ended up split, which continues to this day. When we entered Vietnam, we thought we were trying to stop communism. It turned out we were supporting a corrupt government. U.S. military and Vietnamese forces won every major battle. In the end, it didn't matter. The Vietnamese lived there. It was their home. They were declared the victors. Post-Cold War and New World Order from 1991 to 2001. With the collapse of the Soviet Union, the U.S. emerged as a sole superpower, promoting a unipolar world order based on liberal democracy and free market principles. This period saw interventions in the Gulf War to expel Iraqi forces from Kuwait, humanitarian missions in Somalia, and the NATO intervention in the Balkans to address ethnic conflicts. Those people who had been forced to live together had decided they didn't like each other enough, and they were trying to get people out of their neighborhoods. In some cases, they were old friends, high school friends. The War on Terror in the Middle East engagement from 2001 to 2021. The terrorist attacks of September 11th, 2001 marked a significant shift in U.S. foreign policy. The ensuing War on Terror led to military interventions in Afghanistan and Iraq aimed at dismantling terrorist networks and promoting democracy in the Middle East. This period also saw increased focus on counterterrorism, homeland security, and alliances to combat global extremism. Dominating the Iraqi military turned out to be relatively easy. But we learned the lessons from Vietnam all over again. Defeating their military was rather quick. Conquering the country was very difficult, and we never seemed to get it right. In fact, that's been a common problem for countries throughout history, for civilizations throughout history. Iraq is still trying to find its way forward with competing factions in its country. Now, so since 2021, with contemporary challenges and shifting priorities, in recent years, U.S. foreign policy has grappled with emerging challenges such as the rise of China as a global competitor, cyber threats, global change, climate change. And when I say climate change, climate's always changing. The sun decides what our temperature is going to be. There's also we're starting to see some volcanoes erupt. Underwater volcanoes will spew a lot of water into the moisture into the air, and that will increase temperatures around the world. The pivot to Asia, re-engagement with international institutions and efforts to address global health crises like COVID-19 pandemic reflect a multifaceted approach to maintaining global leadership and addressing 21st century issues. Where are we now? What is our current policy? Foreign policy. Honestly, I couldn't tell you. Afghanistan reconfirmed the lessons we learned in the Philippines, Vietnam, and Iraq. We can conquer the militaries, but it is difficult to exercise control over the people and win their hearts and minds. We betrayed our allies in the process. The last administration assured our European supporters that we would maintain a presence in the country of Afghanistan. We were able to maintain control over most of the country with a small force of, actually I think it was less than 2,000 people, but about 2,000 people, running drone surveillance. Had the British or French known we were leaving, they could have easily replaced us. Instead, we departed in the middle of the night, making it so that the only force able to take control of the country were the Taliban, our enemies for 20 years. From February to August of 2011, Libya went through a civil war. A Middle East coalition backed by the U.S. forces enforced a no-fly zone, and the rebels were able to destroy government forces. The country broke up into different factions, and today they've reinstituted slave markets. It remains a failed state. What was our foreign policy there? Were we trying to promote democracy or something? I don't get that. At the same time Libya was going through a civil war, Syria began their civil war. Syrian Al-Qaeda factions have been identified as a problem even in the latest U.S. threat assessment for the intelligence community, the ATA 2025. Syria has long been a fragile country with many different ethnic groups of Christians, Alawites, Kurds, Druze, Yazidi, but is mostly made up of Sunni Muslims. I think it's about 70-75% of the country. They have been led by the Alawite family of the Assads, and Alawites are a Muslim faction. They follow teachings from a little bit different than the Sunnis or Shiites. The Civil War raged on and off for some time. The U.S. funneled money to various rebel groups, and the New York Times even found out that some of these groups were fighting each other. It turned out that DoD-funded groups were fighting CIA-funded groups. Finally, December of last year, 2024, Syria fell. The Assad regime in Syria fell. The group that has taken over were former, or we think they're former, Al-Qaeda leaders. So the very people we warn our intelligence agencies about have been given a new nation. Now those leaders are leading the new government, and they're taking government forces and militia forces, they're rounding up many of these ethnic and religious minorities to kill them. A lot of reports are coming out about that, and it's just horrific to see what's happened. And considering our policies in the area, it doesn't make sense. Don't try to tell me that we're looking out for people. What is our policy in Ukraine? For years, Ukraine was identified as the most corrupt nation, one of the most corrupt nations on the planet. Now we're sending them weapons and financing with little or no accounting of where the money ends up, or the weapons. Ukrainian parliament held a meeting and announced that they had $7 billion stolen from them. They said they knew where it came from and where it ended up, and asked the then president to help them track it down. Nothing was ever done. We know some of it was lost. We know some of investors' money was lost through Ukraine. If you remember Sam Bankman-Fried, he was running an ETF, and he had a lot of tremendous supporters, some high-profile celebrities that were supporting him. Now he's in jail, and I'm sorry, but Sam just doesn't strike me as the kind of guy who has the charisma, personality, or the intelligence level to get it figured out. I think he was set up. And that's not because I feel bad for the guy. I mean, he had billions of dollars, but, seeing as how it was stolen from him, I have, I guess, just a little bit of sympathy for him. We're entering an age... Oh, let me back up real quick, too. On Ukraine, some of those weapons that we're sending to them, some of them high-end weapons, are getting sold on the black market. And they're showing up in Mexico on the U.S. border. Not that many politicians or bureaucrats seem to care. All these troubles that we're causing for ourselves are leading us into an age that sees European countries and the USA splitting. Europe has learned that they cannot rely on the USA because we work too much with our enemies and fail to hold them accountable, or we identify the wrong enemies. European leaders are meeting and excluding the USA. Germany is planning on a rearmament, expanding their defense budget to $100 billion and encouraging its youth to get fit. They're also warning their people, be careful of an invasion from Russia. Poland is on the front line if Russia invades. Poland borders Belarus, and Belarus supports Russia. So I'm pretty sure Belarus will just invite the Russians in and let them roll into Poland. As a precaution, Poland is expanding its military from 200,000 men to 500,000 men. And they are the only NATO country that is spending as much as requested. They're one of the few that are spending as much as requested. They're spending 3.5% of their GDP on the military. They just recently pulled out of the Personnel Landmine Convention, which is a move that will allow them to use anti-personnel landmines to protect their border. They are looking at purchasing French nuclear weapons. I don't know if this is mostly for optics or if it's real. I get the sense that it is real. They are concerned. I'm sure that part of it are optics to get more defense spending going in European countries. I understand why European is preparing itself. They're tired of the bipolar foreign policy of the United States. And when I say bipolar, I'm talking about the mental disorder, not the focus of political power. I'm tired of our bipolar foreign policy. I'm tired of watching my fellow countrymen going off to die for politicians who will betray them so that they and their friends can get rich. I say they fund the next war out of their own pockets, not ours. Send their own children to fight, not ours. Now, don't get the wrong impression. I'm not a pacifist. Sometimes, on very rare occasions, the only solution you have left is violence. But that should be rare. We should be working to solve problems with communication, economics, before we use threats and resort to violence. Far too many people are far too willing to promote violence today, and many of them are those who were suing for peace just a few years ago. My original question for this video is, what is U.S. foreign policy? We have seen the problems in the Philippines, Vietnam, Iraq, Afghanistan. We have created just chaos in Libya, now Syria. What are we doing? What are we trying to accomplish here? The best I can tell is that U.S. foreign policy is how can multinational companies profit with the help of U.S. military at the expense of everyone involved, meaning everyone gives up their resources, their property, their money, and their lives while these companies grow more powerful. As I say, things are changing in the world, and we need to be prepared. I hope that this has been rather informative for you. I hope that it gives you a little better perspective on what's happening in the world. And I hope that you guys can, I guess, kind of understand where we're going, and where we need to go. Question where we need to go. Please like, share, and subscribe. Again, this is Jeff Rains with Foundation of Civilization. I don't know about you, but I am addicted to this for some reason. It is, I feel like it's my calling. So, and I also want to note that I have passed the 1,000 subscriber mark, if you notice up there, which is a key point for YouTube. Thank you all for your support and for your help, and please, get the word out. I want to try to get the message to as many people as possible, and I hope that you guys are doing well. I hope that you are prepared. Get out and enjoy something today. There's far too much chaos and problems being created. You need to find something for you and your family to have fun with. And until next time, it's Jeff Rains, Foundation of Civilization. Y'all have a great evening, or have a great day.